What's up, everybody? That's my YouTube type of intro. Listen, BLAM team's here. We are talking about issues that are going to be in this gold bowl right here. So you might as well call this BLAM's Golden Bowl, where we talk about different topics, discussions that are going on in today's world and our family. Listen, if you would like to have a topic or issue covered, visit our site, www.blammagazine.com. Write us there, let us know what your issues is, and we'll cover it on this segment. All right, so let me just introduce our wonderful, beautiful panel. Of course, I have my wife,
Amber Riley,
and one of my favorite twin cousins,
Carlos Bain.
And you know, beside every man, there's a queen, and his queen is
Seneca Bean.
Listen, this is a great panel. We have licensed family, marriage counselor, therapy, all that. Just give us a little bit of what it is.
Sure. So I am a licensed professional counselor with Key Counseling and Consultation.
Good. And what's your credentials?
I am a licensed school counselor, and I work with Columbus City Schools.
All right, and you?
Me. Well, I am the founder of BLAM magazine, but I am also in a master's program to become a licensed marriage family therapist.
Woot. We need more.
And for me, I'm just a cinematographer, mentor.
Not just.
Huh?
You are the man.
A mogul. All right. So, who's first with the topics?
Go first.
I'll go first.
You go first? Okay.
All right. Hope it's not a hard one. Okay, so FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and blended families. How does that work?
You're the expert on that, Carlos.
Man, I heard that question. I said I gotta jump in on that one. So yeah, like FAFSA, like that's one of the most important things that a student can do as they're preparing to go to college. Like every kid who graduates from high school should complete a FAFSA, whether they go to college or not, just to see what their options are and what their opportunities could be. And what it will tell you is how much money you can get if you decide to go to college, whether that's a 4-year, 2-year, technical center, all those different options. Now, when it comes to blended families, that's when it can get a little tricky, because with the FAFSA, you have to get not only your own tax information, but also your parents' tax information. It's already difficult enough, especially with those in low-income households, to get parental information if we all live together. But then when you combine it with the idea that we live separately, which parent do I add to my FAFSA form? So that can be a tricky conversation. There are a lot of organizations out there that can help to support families and students to help them navigate that process. So yeah, it's a challenge. I can ramble on all day about that. I can keep going, but I'll stop there for now.
So when it comes to FAFSA, what are some of the responsibilities that come with it, making that decision?
Some of the responsibilities.
I can jump in a
Okay.
little bit.
Yeah.
So one of the things I will say, having been a school counselor and worked with students and families on the FAFSA, is to make sure that people, one, file their taxes, because you need the tax information. But the other thing is, if you can, as a blended family, have a conversation about this, have it. We have to sometimes try to put our differences aside for the student and what they are trying to do, or our child. If you cannot, then at the very least, help coach your child through what they need to get from their parent, the other parent, if the households are not speaking. But it is going to be important. And there could be ways, I don't want to put this out there as if school or colleges are just going to waive all the requirements, but there are some instances where students can file as an independent, but there are certain criteria that they would have to meet for that to take place.
Okay.
And when you say independent, like there's the dependent status and the independent status.
Right.
Most students are going to be dependent, where they're going to need the parents' information. But there are certain situations, like if you're a former foster youth, if you have a child, if you're over the age of 25, you can be independent, where you don't need the parents' information.
Right.
Oh, nice. So this whole panel's already went to school. How
I
has
think we just went through. We kind of
What?
just went through that with Kiera.
mm,
Just trying to figure out who she was gonna
Mm.
file her information under, and I think we just kind of went with like who claimed her own taxes that year. So I did her information this time around, but yeah, I mean, going through the application, it was hard. I'm just trying to think, and I was like, I don't know what to put right here,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and so yeah, that was difficult.
Well, and you bring up a great point, Amber, that trying to determine which parent.
Right.
And I mean, we had that question in our household with our oldest son. So, like, do we put mine and her information, or do we put his mom and her husband's information? And so, what I found out is that it's really based on whichever household the child lives with the most. But then in our case, it's 50-50. So then how do we do that?
Too.
So there's still these questions. And, anytime you have questions, you can always call the federal government. I think the number is 1-800-FAFSA.gov or something like that. But you can go to FAFSA.ed.gov to get information from them, and they can kind of help guide you on giving you recommendations they may suggest.
Right.
I think I actually talked to you about it too, because it was like, so does one house give a better advantage over the other? Because like our household has more children than they do at her father's home, and so it's like, does our household set her up better?
Yeah.
But yeah. It's
Those are
something.
all great questions, because ultimately you want to do the FAFSA so you can get those grants.
Right.
See
Yeah.
what loans are available and decide whether you want them or not, and then see what work study might be available.
Right.
And the more that you appear as a family to have need, the better case you have to be able to get funding. But you also want to make sure that you're being legit in terms of which household does the federal government want on that form, and that's where it can get a little tricky. So reaching out to FAFSA.ed.gov can help you make that determination.
And even as you're doing that, again, reaching out to your school and at least having the conversation so that
Right.
you can navigate and walk through some of those pieces. We may not know everything at the school, but we can help you navigate and find the answers. So.
cool. So you mentioned grants. Like, how does that work for blended families or just regular single family homes?
Well, so when you complete the FAFSA, and this is current rules, so FAFSA is going to be changing in about 2 or 3 years. It's going to be a reduced form. But the way it works right now is when you complete the FAFSA, it spits out a number called the expected family contribution. And that number, the lower it is, it goes from like 0 to infinity. But the lower the number is, the more you can get in grants and loans and work study dollars. So then once you have that figure, the institutions also have that figure, and they can determine how much aid you can get from each particular campus. But again, the lower that number is, the better chance you have of receiving grants like the Pell Grant, or like the SEOG grant, or federal student loans. So yeah.
And then, when we talk about the loan, because people are like, I don't know
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
but the reality is, school is expensive. We know.
Yeah.
And I always tell students, if you have to invest in something, invest in yourself. But
Yep.
be smart about what you take out, because just because you get a loan package does not mean you have to take all of the loan dollars.
Right.
And
We've
so
been
really
guilty of
thinking
that.
through, we have been guilty.
You get $3,000,
I'm gonna pay for my apartment. No, but be thoughtful. And in some cases, kids may have to pay for an apartment. If you're from a foster family and you have now aged out, you need somewhere to live.
Right.
And so
right.
either you live in the dorms or an apartment or whatever, but you have to be smart about the dollars because you do have to pay them back. So, yeah.
You do have to pay them back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you do.
The decline of mental health in the Black community due to social ills.
The decline of mental health in the Black community.
So I can actually start on that. I was
Okay.
listening to a podcast a few weeks ago, and they were talking about the story of John Henry. And that's the story of John Henry was at the railroad, and compete against the machine. And so it was him and his hammer. And eventually, at the end of the competition, he beat the machine, but he died. And so they liken that to culture today, society today, and how hard we as Black people, we have to work harder than everyone else. We have to think harder than everyone else. And so how does that affect us? How does it affect our minds? How does it affect our mental states as far as, going to work and maybe being paid less for something that somebody, else is doing? Training somebody who is not this, to watch them only to, come like into position, whether it's equal with you or above you, and they're getting paid more. Just, I guess, we could go on and on about
That's
about
a deep one.
situations.
I think about even some situations. We were having this conversation last night, in the way that we feel, I'll speak as African American women, that we have to show up. And so I was preparing for a class that I teach, and I prepared for a week. I've been looking at stuff and preparing and doing all these things. And my co-facilitator shows up last night, and she's like, "Oh, I can't find the script. It's 5 minutes before the class is getting ready to start." And so for me, it reiterated what I already felt, is that we have to always show up and do 20 times more in order to be viewed the same way that others are. And so it was a little frustrating. I was talking to Carlos about it, but it really, and mentally, that definitely is tough. And I see that with some of our students, in that they already count themselves out for whatever reason. And so we have to constantly try to build them up and let them know you are good enough. It doesn't matter if this person or that person is doing something. You have to concentrate on you and what you are trying to do, and don't let your circumstances dictate who you are. So I just see that play out in a lot of different scenarios, but that was the most recent.
Yeah, it is tough, because as a Black male, I always go back to the story that my supervisor told me about when he started our organization, Key Counseling, and it was him as an African American male and 2 Caucasian females that were interning together. And at the end of the internship, they offered the 2 young Caucasian ladies a position, but didn't offer my supervisor a position. And he was like, "Well, we're all in this together. Why couldn't I get a position?" And they rattled off of some stuff, whatever the reason was. But for him, that said, you know what, we need more Black people in this space, because it seems like they're not letting me in this universe, but we clearly need these supports. And so, Key Counseling prides ourselves on being an organization, a company that is with clinicians that are all of color. You don't see that. The therapy space is one where the number of clinicians of color is extremely low, but there's a whole lot of folks of color that need to go see somebody.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things we know about therapy is that the most important piece of it is building a connection. So, I can relate with anybody. I got, plenty of Black folks, white folks, Asian folks that are on my caseload, but I'm able to relate with them as a person, and they're able to vibe with me. We're able to just have a conversation. But like, if I happen to be someone that didn't come up in the hood, and I'm talking to a kid that's from the hood, we just don't vibe, and I'm thinking, well, what this person's going through, this seems to be abnormal to me, and this person has this diagnosis. Well, hold on. If this is their normal, let's not pigeonhole them. But that happens so often because people don't understand what kids or adults have been through. They can't relate. So I'm rambling, but it circles back to what y'all were talking about, just the discrepancies between people of color and the majority population and how things play out.
How do you think it plays out in regards to when you gave statistics of that demographic? Do you have more of Black clients, or is it, I don't even know if you can say that, but let's say on a holistic, do you think more of the other cultures get therapy versus African American?
Based on what I've seen overall globally with therapeutic relationships, there are a lot more Caucasian individuals who seek therapy over folks that are of color. I know we just, as African Americans, we don't trust, we don't talk. We were taught to keep within our circles and silos and don't go outside of that. We see that in our own family with some of the folks that just, we stay on this side of town, we don't fool with nobody over there. And that plays out in the therapeutic space because you don't feel comfortable talking to people that don't look like you or don't have a similar experience. And that's just people of color. But what we're beginning to find out is that as more people come out and say, yeah, I have a therapist or I'm a therapist, then there's more people that feel more comfortable about going out and seeking help and realizing like there's nothing wrong with talking to somebody. Everybody's a therapist. I have a therapist. We all need to be able to talk to somebody about stuff because we can't, well, I guess we can come up with our own answers to stuff, but you need to be able to bounce those ideas off of somebody and
Right.
be able to talk to them about it.
Good stuff.
And one of the things I'll just add really quick, we were talking about last night in my class with some teacher leaders was about implicit bias, and a lot of that shows up. And if we don't examine our implicit biases, because we all have them, then we are not able to make informed decisions, and we can't be strategic in the decisions that we make. And so I see it on both sides with some of our people, some of our family. They're kind of like, I don't want to do that, and they have a whole list of reasons why, but it may not be the true case. It's just the reason, because of the biases or their and what we know about implicit bias is it is shaped by who you are, your culture, what you learn. And I wish I had a visual, but if you visualize the iceberg, everything beneath the surface of the iceberg is in our subconscious, right? So that's your core values, what's right and wrong, how we live, how we move, our culture. Everything above the iceberg is what everybody else sees, right? And so you really don't know what people are thinking or feeling. You only see their representative. And so I think about mental health, I think about implicit bias, and I think about how all that intersects. And then you have a culture of people who, because of how they grew up, they just don't want to seek therapy or talk about it.
Wow, that was neat.
Two, maybe three things. One, you said your supervisor, he couldn't, get in with the two Caucasian ladies. How do you think that plays into, because we talk about all the time, we actually want to do a documentary on like systemic breakup of Black families. Do you think that plays into not having somebody for like a Black family to look at as far as therapy, being able to trust somebody? That's one. Two, I don't know, one of y'all said something about I guess with this topic, it's safe to say like the mental issues can start as children.
Oh God, yes.
In school. I can remember even just like being in the cafeteria in high school, and this is just the first thing that came to my mind in high school, getting in trouble in the cafeteria. And I remember going home and telling my mom, like, so I don't understand why they said something to me when there's this whole table of other children who are doing more and were more loud than what I was doing, and nobody says anything to them. And her telling me, you can't do everything everybody else does. They're gonna see you before they see everybody else. And so even with my children's school, even in elementary school, the speech teachers, occupational therapists, or things that I'll just go with the speech teacher. So they, put some of our boys in speech, and so like we're like, I don't understand why he's in speech because he talks fine. Like sometimes they say things and I'm like, where did you get that from? But they're not saying things that they expect them to say, but that may not be in their culture to think about.
Right.
That may not be what we talk about in our house. And so he does talk about things that he knows, but what you're trying to make him say, or what you want him to say, may not be his culture. That's
right.
your culture.
That's right. Yeah.
You got your number 3?
Yeah.
That was good though.
Can I answer 2?
Yeah, because she's on a roll.
Yeah, and then because I forgot 1, but I remember 2. And then you had to re-ask 1, then you can ask 3. So there's some. This is so critical though, because there was some research that was done out of Dayton, where they talked about assessments and tests, and how on a test a kid might be asked, "Where do you go to get food?" And for most of us, we might say grocery store, corner. You might even say corner store, maybe Walmart. But a particular subset of kids only knew to get food from like a food giveaway, and that wasn't an option. So was it fair on that assessment where this kid was like, you know, these don't relate to me? And so the story that I read was a teacher told the kids, you are not allowed to ask me any questions when the test comes out, because that was part of the rule. But this student was like, none of these 4 options fit me. What do I pick? And the teacher just broke out in tears, like, I never thought about what this kid is going through and how they can't answer any of these questions. And so when you talk about that bias, the lived experience, like you were saying, Amber, what your kid knows as their culture may be different from what the teacher's perspective. It doesn't make the teacher's perspective correct. That's just what they know. That's their lived experience, but they don't make it correct. And so the way our kids are educated, it's frustrating because they're educated under a system that has to look one way, but we all look very different in our experience. So it's just wild.
This is deep, man. That's deep, man. Wow.
Because when you start to think about the systems and systemic racism and how that impacts children and you know, the education system, I'll be honest, is not set up for our children in the way that it's set up for others. And just what you said, all of these things start to play out, because I'm thinking about a conversation. So our gifted school, they want to work with their students of color because they're noticing some things with their students of color in that space where all the students are gifted, right? And so I'm on that committee, I'm listening. And it took for a teacher in that building with a master's degree, who's Black, who's a female, to talk about her experience living in poverty and being a student in poverty in a gifted school, for the other teachers to start to understand what was happening with the other kids. Because she said, you could say, go home and get this poster board and do this whole activity. She said, my mom was working 2 jobs. We couldn't afford no poster board and all these supplies. And she said it put her in so many difficult positions because she could not afford. And then you don't want to say that in front of the class.
Right.
You don't want to be, and so it all of this, we could be on this for a while.
I remember, like, even our first days of school, like, living with, it was 8 of us in the house. So you got to think about, you guys got to, let's say the first day of school, these are the supplies you need to come with. 8 things of tissue boxes, 4 packs of crayons, all this paper, the binder. I'm like, man, listen, there's 8 of us and we're all in school.
Right.
We might have notebook from last year. You know what I'm saying? Annette might came, you know what I'm saying? Jess might have, you know, but it's just like some of those expectations is just not right, you know? So,
and you're left to, like, as a kid, not as an adult, but a kid, how do I figure this out? How do I not be embarrassed in front of my peers? How do I ask mom and dad that are stressed out, but I don't understand why they're stressed out? Because they don't want to talk about it because we don't talk. Like, it's all these different layers, man. It just, it's crazy.
Wow.
It's crazy.
That's something.
So y'all reminded me of my 3rd.
We still remember the first one.
Right.
What was the first one?
Because I like the first one.
The first one was the systemic issue as far as family, as far as the Black family, and maybe not pushing to have as many Black people in the therapy industry. Is that like part of a system, or do you think, even if, you know, they may not be doing it on purpose, but could that be part of it? this systemic issue, because that's a whole nother issue of keeping us apart.
Yeah. I'll answer that quickly and just give my perspective, which is there's a bigger system that's, in my opinion, that influences how those that are in power can make decisions.
Mhm.
Now, whether they intentionally make those decisions to then keep other folks down, I'm not going to put that on those individuals. But there's a system that's created. We watched that documentary, The 13th,
Yeah.
and it talks about the prison pipeline.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, man.
Did y'all see that? And
Oh,
it's
my
just like when
goodness.
you read, like we watched it with our boys, and we were just like, this system, like it's a machine, and it's been designed since we got here in the boats,
Mhm.
and it just they keep changing pieces of it, but it's still the same machine that
Because
eventually keeps us
it's still
down.
the same people running the machine.
Exactly.
Yep.
That
Yeah.
hasn't changed.
That hasn't
Mhm.
changed.
The other thing that I will say is there's always a blessing in what seems to be a challenge at the time. So he did not get that position. He now has a flourishing organization
that's
that's
true.
like a uniform with all African American
That's
therapists.
dope.
That would not have happened if he was working under someone else's
So, yeah,
system. So
resulted
sometimes
from-
the Lord does that for you, and
Right.
it
right.
works out.
Mhm.
Or
Nice
every
stuff.
time, not sometimes.
Every time. Ah,
Every time. Yes.
yeah.
Holla. So the third thing still kind of goes in with all of this is finances.
Mm.
Can Black people afford to go to therapy? And even if you have a job that has benefits or they have an EAP that will, maybe give you a couple free sessions, and then they may just discount, if you need any additional.
Mhm.
Like, is it out of reach?
That's a good question.
That's a great question. And between deductibles, copays, EAP, insurance, it's like there's different ways to pay for therapy sessions. But it varies. I mean, I have some clients that come in, they drop me $10 for their copay, they good. Other ones, they pay them $125 a session.
Mm.
And I mean, whether you paying 10 or 125, you still gonna get the same support from me because at the end of the day, I'm just here to serve. But they had to pay a different amount, and it's based on insurance. If they have insurance, what the insurance covers. And so for people of color that may already have financial challenges, and not that other folks don't, but I'm just as an example here. Then you have to weigh out, like, what's my priority? Do I go seek therapy or do I eat today? Do I seek therapy or do I pay my electric bill? Like, you got to weigh those different things. And I just, I think sometimes that therapy gets pushed off to the side because of the expenses tied to it. Or the question isn't asked. I've had some people say, well, yeah, I thought about therapy, but I think it's too expensive. Well, why don't you check with your insurance company, see what they're going to cover? So sometimes the lack of knowledge keeps us from even being able to figure out if we can do it. You got to ask the questions and then make a decision versus assuming. So,
That's
yeah,
dope.
yeah.
Good stuff. What are you looking at my hair?
No.
It ain't like cousin
No.
Carlos's.
No, I was looking for a clock.
Oh, wow. See what? After these messages, we'll be right back. All right, you at 10:25.
Oh, we good.
All right,
We good.
ready?
Yes. I already picked one. So
Oh.
it's on you and Carlos.
the
Oh, they're gonna play this.
Ooh.
Child support is the legal answer to the financial divide
And
What do-
between households? I forgot to put that there.
in between households. What do we do about the structure divide?
Ooh, Lord. I think we
Sorry,
are
guys.
professionals on this one. You can get comfortable. Oh.
And so just in case, those who are listening, just to explain, so the question is, child support is the legal answer to make up for missing finances between households. But there are other issues that we have between in blended families and between households, and that can be, not always in every family, but a structured divide. There's a difference in household rules. There's a difference in standards, and that can get really frustrating. And
Yeah.
So how do we deal with those?
Wow.
Just throw it out there. just throw it out. So let's say, for instance, if growing up for us, and again, I think this kind of goes back to school too. The standard for school and athletics, the grade point average, you had to have at least a 2.0
think so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
to be active.
Mhm.
That's, yeah.
But now, I want to say, due to social media, and just the fact that kids become stars at such a young age, and the audience, the standard is low.
Mhm.
For Reynoldsburg, I think they said you got, if you have, what was it, 1.5,
I think no, 1.8. I wanna say
1.8.
Wow.
Don't quote us on that. I would need to look, but it's low.
It's pretty
even
low.
a 2.0 is low. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
2.0 is
C,
still
yeah.
low.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you have those things where, of course, in our situation, or the Raleigh family, school was hard for all the brothers. You know what I'm saying? And then, I went through stuff in high school, didn't graduate in time, did the proficiency test. So one of my biggest things with my kids is you have to have the education. You have to have that before sports, before music, before anything.
Mhm.
So having that type of background, and then trying to implement those things that will help your child, it becomes a struggle, because all they want is the popcorn. Let's just, I'm gonna go to school, I'm gonna fail, but I'm gonna still have that opportunity to, play sports. So it's kind of like the structure is different. My rules, and then once they go to their parents, are two certain things, but it shouldn't be. But you can't control that household. So it's like, how do you even,
I wish there was an answer, my brother.
I'm telling you, man, because it's like at some point it's like, okay, I have to turn this over to, like my mom would say, when we were freshmen was born, she got us baptized a Christian. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like with our kids, okay, well, all I can do is turn you over to God.
I
Because
mean,
if I,
listen, that
know?
is so real, and we're being fully transparent. We are part of blended families here, so like, I mean, it's not easy, and I think about our situation, and I think about how we had an easier situation that we're currently dealing with, and one that was tough as nails. And the reason the one that was tough as nails was the way it was because we couldn't get on the same page with that other parent. We just, no matter what we did, it was a fight. And so when you ask for like what do you do in those situations? A whole lot of prayer. A whole lot of prayer. Now, what we ended up doing, we had to lean on the court system because with our oldest, what our mom was up to was a little, it was shady. It was, I want all these things, but you can't do this with her. And so my wife was like, listen, we just got to go the court route and just be able to get this legalized. And even though it was scary and it was an investment of several $1,000s at the time, it was worth every penny. Because once it was set up, then mom couldn't come back and say, well, I don't like this. You can't see her next week. Like, it was all documented.
Yeah.
And then it was a legal document that we had to follow going forward. Now, when it comes to sports or extracurriculars, the documentation does dive into it a little bit, but it keeps it pretty general. And so it does force the parents of each household to try to figure out some things to negotiate. But at least by having that paper as kind of your concrete, you have something to lean on that you can sort of fall back on. And luckily, we didn't have to, because with our oldest, she wasn't heavily involved in sports. But we had that where it has some language about extracurriculars in there that helped to guide us through that process. But it was not easy. It took a lot of prayer. Yeah.
So you actually had documents that stated what? Did y'all have to come to an agreement on
How did that work out?
what she could do, or?
So the way the courts work, the courts they don't. So the courts don't want to be so prescriptive that like they try to tell you everything you're going to do. So they primarily focus in on the money and the visitation. So how often are you going to see your kid? How much are you going to pay? But they also ask questions about which parent is responsible for educational purposes. Who's going to be over the taxes? Like who gets to claim the child? Extracurriculars, which parent gets to determine extracurriculars. So those things are kind of listed out in the documentation. And then once it's established, if someone breaks a rule, you can technically take them back to court. I mean, you had that as, hey, this is the rule that we agreed to. so you follow that document the best you can. That made it easier for us because what we were dealing with, yeah, that was a tough time in my life. That's why I got the grades now. I'm stuck. I'm not here to disparage nobody.
Man. All right. Well,
I would just add, in this space, being I like to call bonus mom, not stepmom, in this situation, it definitely, you have to be on the same page though with your spouse at the very least, because you don't know what's going to happen with the other house. And I know that there were times in our space where we were not on the same page because I didn't understand some things. I was trying to figure it out. We were young. And we would butt heads sometimes, but we would always go in and talk it out and figure it out. But I would definitely say, one, it's not easy. If you are new in a space where there's a blended family, I remember when we went to marriage counseling to see our pastor, and we were like, we were talking about having a blended family. We were like, we'll just figure it out. And he busted out laughing. And we were looking at him like, what is he laughing about? We later understood why he was laughing so hard, because we were so naive, right? We're like, we can conquer the world and it's going to be great. But it was some pushing and pulling in that thing to get us on the same page. And I will say, as a bonus mom, though, I had to look myself in the mirror, and the Lord checked me also in this space, because I wasn't right in every single thing that I was thinking. But through that, the prayer will keep you grounded in this space so that you can come together as, a couple. And then, once our oldest, she got to be a teenager, she was doing what real teenagers do, right? But in a blended space, you're like, oh my goodness, she's attacking me, or, whatever. And now we have a beautiful relationship, but during that time, it was tough.
It was tough.
It was tough.
In fact, I remember I had to pull the oldest and my wife together, and we had a conference in the basement. And I said, listen, we can't control what happens over there. All we can do is control this space. And we were able to have this conversation in terms of, when we're here, this is how we're going to operate here. And we agreed through tears and everything. Yeah, we agreed, and it worked out. And like Cindy said, now their relationship is great. It was tough then because she was a teen, and teens are going to do what they do.
Influences, right?
Yeah.
Let's be real. When you leave this space, there are other influences that are influencing the way you think, the way you act when you come back over here, all of that. So
they're still trying to figure out their brains, and like you said, you might have felt attacked. She got all that gray matter in her head that ain't fully developed, so then it's like, you're operating from a space of, but this is what I want, so if I do this, so it's a whole lot going on there.
Yeah.
The best advice, because I don't want it to all seem bad.
Right.
We also have a situation where, with my oldest son, me, my wife, his mom, his mom's husband, we all get along. We had a situation where the oldest got into some trouble. We got on a Zoom call together, and we let him know on that Zoom call, we all love you. We here to support you, but if you keep doing this dumb stuff, we gonna deal with you together. And it's kept him out of trouble. Like, that freaked him out. He was embarrassed by it. He learned from it. But it's because we came together as a unit of 4. And even though we ain't in the same household, we have some different rules in terms of how we raise our kids. For the most part, we're able to operate similarly. But it took us to be able to be the adults in the room. But that's not always easy, because we were blessed to have that situation. That ain't always the case.
And even that situation started out rocky, right? We all met in college. We all knew each other with different people. He was with her, I was with someone else, and then we ended up together. And so, in the beginning, you still got to massage some of them things and make sure that you're making the right decisions. But one of the things that I can say is he's always made the best decision for our household and for the children. It's not this back and forth and all this arguing. And, well, not with the second one. Wait a minute now. But we've grown. Let's say that.
Yes, we have grown.
I can't see you mad at nobody, bro.
Man, that's what she used to say. Like, it's only one person could do it.
It's only one person. It's not even me.
Well, it's
now,
two.
I've successfully figured out how to upset him. However, 16 years. But
That's what's up, man.
Yeah, it takes a lot of calm and patience and prayer.
Yeah.
see what
Mhm.
Right.
Good stuff, man.
All right, last question.
Oh, it's for me.
Los.
All right. Oh, let me see what's going on here. Let's see what it's talking about.
Good idea, by the way.
Healthy relationships equals healthy mentality. Healthy relationships equals healthy mentality. Who wants to jump in? That's the truth right there.
Well,
Be like, you wrote it.
I'll tell you.
Where was you going with that, Amber?
Right, where was you going with that?
Well, the next issue, even though I think we're pretty much a mental health magazine, and it's the mental health of the family, relationships is always a big thing to talk about. But I was thinking about how I had listened to, and I believe we had talked about it in another podcast that we did before, how that the death rate of people in a bad relationship is up there with high blood pressure, heart attack, if not a little higher. And so that is kind of what that's speaking on. How important is it to make sure, or to be, I guess, I don't know what the word is, intentional about who you're getting into a relationship with.
Yeah.
Whether that's personal relationship, whether it's business relationship, any kind of relationship, how important that is to make sure that you're getting, in connection with the right people.
Yeah, that is immensely important because we know, like from a therapeutic lens, if you deal with somebody that says something that weighs you down, that's going to stick with you. That's just one instance. If you're around a whole bunch of people that they're all negative, more than likely you're going to become negative.
Right.
But we also know if you surround yourself with some positive individuals, that's going to lead you to be more positive. So healthy relationships, healthy mentality, like there is a connection there. If you're around positive people, that will help you. It won't fix everything, but it'll help your mentality when you're dealing with stuff. I think back to, I can't really talk about any of my caseload stuff, but I think about some of my clients and the stories they share in session. And I'm sitting back like, you just need to, I don't say this, but I'm like, you just need to cut this person out your life. Because this person they describe in session is making them, or they're allowing this person to make them behave a certain way. And so when I'm in session with this person, I'm thinking, if you change this relationship, your lifestyle will be a whole lot better. It's not gonna be perfect, but it'll be a whole lot better if you change the people that you're around. Now, trying to convince somebody of that is a whole different animal. But the conversation does come up a lot in therapy. It's changing your relationships because that does impact your mentality.
Yeah, and part of, in the book I was actually reading from Cheryl Travis, she was talking about Help God I'm Hurt. One of the things that I saw in there and that I appreciate that she pointed out, is sometimes people will go back to the pain and back to the hurt out of fear of what's on the other side of it, because they don't know.
Comfort.
Yep.
And so I think that sometimes people in these relationships, they go back to this fear, or out of fear, they go back to their familiar, even though it is not healthy. And I just can't, I don't understand, and I won't pass judgment on anyone, but when I come home, I want that to be my sanctuary. I don't want to be arguing and mad, and because that, again, you stay in that fight or flight, mentality all the
All
time.
day.
And then we think about, even when we talk about children or we talk about people that's around us, you can say one little thing and they blow up. It's because they're already in that space. They're already almost on 10. And, I just, for the sake of people's mental health, I really am hopeful that people will start to think about those people that they have in their lives and how those people are making them feel. And I know it's hard not to communicate with people that you've always communicated with, but yeah, it's really unhealthy. happy.
Yeah, I think that a person's stress level increases.
Yes.
Just imagine if I'm dealing with a abusive spouse and I'm
Yes.
going to that every day. It's just like you don't know what to think. You don't know if am I looking wrong or you know what I'm saying. I think that's
Right.
crazy. And then also if it's somewhere where you're active and there's no support,
Yeah.
it becomes like I'm crippled. Like because no matter what I do, that person who's supposed to be like my sidekick, Robin, whatever, is not there to support. So that becomes, unhealthy. I think me and Eddie B were talking about it last night, and just having that support system and how it helps you to navigate the different stresses and combat some of those gray areas in your mind, man. So having a relationship, even if it's a group of people or it's a group of guys and there's a person who this person he's addicted to trouble. He likes trouble and he attracts it. You don't need to be around that. So
Right. And
It's
you
important.
bring up a good point about a support system because as we talk about being in a blended family and when we were newly married, there were a group of his fraternity brothers that would get together, and one of them had been married how long? About 20, 30
At that time,
years.
probably about 25 years.
Yeah. But he would get together with those who were newly married and they would have conversations. And I would notice if we had a disagreement and he go to that group when we come back, we were good because he was able to talk it out with some people that were going through either something similar because we had a lot of blended families in our
Yeah.
lives,
Right.
or someone he's more seasoned and he's like, okay, you gotta pick your battles. Like there are some battles you want to fight and some that you just gotta let go.
yeah.
That was helpful.
Yeah, we don't come to the table with all the answers. And I do remember that group coming together and talking. We had fish and juice, fish and Kool-Aid.
Speaking of fish, I don't mean to tell you.
We
That
gonna do
fish
that.
she made that one day at the what was that?
We was at that park.
At that park
Yeah, man.
with that seasoning.
Yeah.
That Angie seasoning.
Oh, and seasoning.
I can't wait to do it again, my
All right, I
brother.
digressed. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
we're gonna be back on
I'm
that.
sorry.
Maybe we do the next one around
Yeah,
some fish.
man,
You know, I don't know.
Sounds
But
good to me.
I love that fish. Boy, ooh, man, that's tasty.
Oh wait.
I know, right? Let's put a smile on my face. But that goes back into this, like, good fish, good relationships, like it all comes together. Like when you can vibe over some food and just have a conversation and let people know, like, yeah, we argue, but we argue healthily.
Yeah.
We debate.
We debate.
Yeah, I say we debate. We don't argue. Like we don't yell and throw stuff.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's refacing it.
Yeah.
I mean, if absent that's not a normal relationship. You should have times when you don't agree about
That's
stuff.
right.
That's normal. What's not normal is taking this and smacking her in the head. That's not normal, and some people do that.
Yeah,
And if I did that, I'd probably get in a whole lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But some people do that. That's not healthy, and so being able to separate from people that may make you feel like doing that is okay, and just being around people that are more positive can really help to. Again, it won't fix everything, but it will help you think differently when you get in those moments where something is going south.
And part of it is knowing yourself. Like
Yeah.
I know that I can go way over, so I need someone to calm in my life to keep me level.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
You gotta know yourself.
We was driving here today, and she was having a conniption about her app wasn't working. Why won't my app work? And I'm like, I'm driving, babe. Will you calm down? I had to deep breathe. I was like, okay, this is just her behaving as she behaves. Let me not go off, because that ain't gonna help nothing. We're trying to get to this location safely. And I know my wife, she can be she can be hyper sometimes. But me knowing her, and she knows I'm too calm sometimes, and she be trying to get me riled up. So we found each other out very well.
So, I think we the same way. Like, I be like a mean old lion over wins, man. Like, let's say if I'm doing something, and it's never like I think if we have our issues, it's over something that doesn't even exist the next 5 minutes. It's not, so we pretty cool. I mean, I'm not going to bed angry. I'm not sleeping alone, and I'm not sleeping on the couch. So that's not working. So, but yeah, like she does that. So, so you mentioned, like you guys mentioned, you hooked up with the more seasoned people. You had how important is having outside influences as far as like a support? Like I know we just talked about support system, but when you were talking, it made me think about our other partners, Calvin in Bell, and how me and Calvin, we spend a lot of time on the golf course,
Mhm.
and like we've been in tears on the golf course. We've been very active, and we talk about a lot of stuff, a lot of issues that we had growing up. But the point that we're there for each other, and it's different. So when I come home, I'm like, hey, what's going on, babe? What you doing? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So those support systems, it's really important, man.
It's immense. It's you. I recommend everyone should have one. I talk to some people that are young and married, and I'll say, if you're young and married, you probably don't want to have a bunch of friends that are single,
Oh yeah.
right? Like you probably want to find you some young married couples that you hang out with, and then also find some veterans. We actually have a couple, like we have the family that we're talking about in this situation, but there's others at our church that have been married for years that we're like, yeah, let's go talk to them and just, how did y'all get to 30? How did y'all get to 50? And they'll tell us like, yeah, we had some challenges. There were times when we didn't have money to eat, but we were always together and we figured it out together. And I think just hearing those stories, it's like inspirational. It's encouraging. It's just good to know, like, even though when we go through stuff, like all couples go through stuff, and if you pretend like you don't, something's wrong.
Yeah, man.
Stop faking the funk, or as you said, what was it, the representative? Stop putting that out there. Let's keep it 100. Like everybody deals with stuff.
Right.
Let's figure out how to deal with it, because stuff is gonna keep coming up. That's not gonna stop. But how we deal with those things is what's key. Yeah.
And I think the only other thing that I would add to all of that is that I guess kind of that's what we're in the business of, and I just want to extend healthy relationships to healthy families, and if we can heal the family base, that creates an atmosphere for the children to be able to learn who to look at, how to process problems in the correct way. And I believe so that not only does that help for a healthy mental state, it helps for a healthy community.
Yeah. No doubt.
That lowers the crime rate. That lowers the, whatever other percentages there are out there that are negative. The fixing the family is going to be what changes all of that.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Well, we're out of topics, discussion. So again, if you would like to send in, I forgot what I was going to say. Send in something, issue that you want us to cover. Let us know. Go to our website, and we will add it to our golden bow. Okay. Again, we thank you. The May edition will be out. May. May 15th. Again, visit us online. Subscribe, like this page, and thank you.